Iran's worst terror is actually happening. Not a threat, not a warning. It's already unfolding. Right now, in the dark waters of the Strait of Hormuz, a ship is being watched, a law is being written, and a leader, who hasn't been seen in public since the day he took power, is somehow still expected to sign it. But here's the question. Nobody in the region wants to ask out loud what happens when the man who's supposed to give the order can't be found. Welcome back to the Siege War. Before we go any further into this, if you've been with us for a while, you already know how these stories tend to unfold. Slowly, and then all at once. So, if you're one of the folks who's been quietly following along, watching how the world is shifting one decision at a time, do us a favor. Tap that subscribe button. It costs nothing. It takes 2 seconds. And it means the next time something like this happens, you won't have to go looking for it. It'll come straight to you. And we're always curious. Drop in the comments where you're watching from today. Every corner of the world seems to be paying attention to this one. Now, let's get into what's actually happening. It started with a piece of paper. Not a missile, not a warship. A piece of paper sitting inside a committee room in Iran's parliament. On that paper, lawmakers wrote something strange. They wrote that foreign warships, including American ones, now need written permission before entering the waters near Iran. A hall pass. That's what they're asking for. A hall pass for one of the most powerful navies on Earth. Sitting in the Arabian Sea right now is a massive American ship called the USS Boxer. It's an amphibious assault ship. It carries fighter jets. It carries thousands of Marines. It carries landing craft built to put troops on a hostile shore. This ship checked into the region back in June. Since then, it's been part of something bigger. A wall of American ships blocking traffic through the waters near Iran. And here's the number that matters. In all that time, how many U.S. warships have asked Iran for permission to be there? 0, not 1. So now Iran's parliament wants to change that. They want a law that finally forces anyone, to ask for approval. But there's a problem. The people writing this law don't actually control the situation. They're trying to write themselves into power over something they've already lost control of. Because right now, nearly 50 commercial ships have been turned back or stopped by that American blockade. Iran is reportedly losing hundreds of millions of dollars every single day. That's the real story behind this new law. It's not strength. It's desperation dressed up as legislation. Alongside the permission rule, the committee added something else, a toll, a tax on cargo passing through the Strait, something close to 7% of a ship's entire cargo value. And if a ship refuses to pay, the fine jumps even higher. Think about that for a second. A country trying to legally charge the rest of the world just to use an international waterway. A waterway that has never belonged to any single nation. Iran's own foreign ministry has said something very different from what Parliament is writing. The ministry claims a shipping arrangement is almost finished, a deal made with a neighboring country to keep trade moving. But that deal still needs one final signature, the signature of the supreme leader. And that's where things get complicated. Because the man in charge of approving everything hasn't appeared in public even once since taking office. Not once. Even Iran's own president has admitted in public that he struggles to reach him directly. So here is Iran, trying to pass a law that requires the world's most powerful navy to ask for permission, while the one person required to approve any real deal can't even be reached by his own government. Washington's answer to all of this was short and simple. No approvals, no tolls, no permissions. An American official said clearly that the Strait is international water and no single country controls who passes through it, no matter how many laws get written. So what is really happening here? A country under enormous pressure, losing money by the hour, trying to turn its own weakness into something that looks like law, hoping the rest of the world will simply go along with it. But ships like the USS Boxer aren't waiting for permission. They never were. And that leaves one question hanging in the air as this story moves forward. If Iran can't even get its own leadership to sign off on a deal, how exactly does it plan to enforce a law on the rest of the world? Picture a document sitting quietly inside a government office in Tehran. Nobody outside that room has fully seen it, but pieces of it have started leaking out. And what's inside changes everything about how this standoff looks. On one side, there's Iran's foreign ministry. They're telling the world a peaceful story, a story about coordinates being agreed on, ships entering through one path and leaving through another, shared quietly with a neighboring country. Markets actually believed it. Oil prices dropped. Investors relaxed. For a moment, it looked like the crisis was cooling down, but that story wasn't the full picture. Because at the very same time, a different version of events was moving through Iran's own state-linked media. A preliminary bill sitting inside a parliamentary committee. And this version says something far more aggressive. It says any ship connected to the United States or Israel can be blocked outright. Not just blocked temporarily, blocked completely. with no warning required. It says any country that Iran claims has caused it damage can be barred until that country pays compensation, whatever amount Iran decides to demand. And everyone else pays a toll just to pass through. So on paper, Iran is offering peace, but underneath, it's writing a law that gives itself total control over who gets to trade, who gets to sail, and who gets punished. A senior lawmaker confirmed the committee is reviewing this bill, but here's the detail almost nobody caught. He also said the legislation is still under expert review, which means even after all this drafting, it hasn't been approved yet. Not by the courts, not by the top leadership, not by the one man whose signature actually matters. Meanwhile, from Washington, the response came fast and direct. No approvals, no permissions, no tolls of any kind. A U.S. official stated plainly that this is an international waterway, and no single nation gets to decide who uses it. Even the country's own president seemed to soften the tone in public, saying Iran is ready to return to its earlier commitments. But there's a catch. He also admitted there are currently no active negotiations happening with the United States at all. So which version is true? The calm diplomatic story about shared shipping lanes? Or the aggressive legal draft demanding fees and bans? The honest answer is both exist at the same time. One version is being shown to the world. The other is being quietly written into law. And that gap between what's said publicly and what's drafted privately is exactly where the danger sits. Because international partners don't know which version to trust. Shipping companies don't know which rules will actually apply next week. And every day that passes without clarity adds more pressure onto a system that is already stretched to its limit. The blockade is still active. Ships are still being turned back. Money is still draining out of the country by the hour. And somewhere in the middle of all this, a law is being built, not to solve the crisis, but to give Iran something that looks like leverage, even if the rest of the world refuses to recognize it. Because a law only works if someone is willing to enforce it. And right now, the question isn't whether Iran can write this law. It's whether anyone, anywhere, is going to follow it. Somewhere inside Iran, there is an office. A very important office. The office of the man who is supposed to be in charge of everything. But here's the strange part. Nobody has actually seen him. Not since the day he took that position back in March. He wasn't seen at his own ceremony. He wasn't seen at his own father's funeral. Everything that comes out of that office arrives the same way. As written statements, read out by state media, no live appearances, no public speeches, just paper. Even Iran's own president has admitted something remarkable. He said in public that he cannot reliably reach this man. Think about that. The president of the country, struggling to contact the person who is supposed to approve the biggest decisions facing the nation. And according to reporting, any real shipping agreement with neighboring countries still needs exactly one thing before it can move forward. His final signature. Without it, nothing is official. Nothing is binding. So the question becomes obvious. If almost nobody can reach him, how is anything supposed to get approved? This isn't just a strange detail. It connects to something said months earlier in an interview that barely got noticed at the time. Iran's own foreign minister admitted that the closure of the Strait was tied to one single condition from the very beginning. If the leader himself were ever targeted, the Strait would close. Not because of oil, not because of sanctions, because of one man's safety. That single sentence explains a lot. It explains why the waterway hasn't fully reopened, even as everyone claims a deal is close. Because the policy tied to that closure can only be canceled by the same person it was written to protect. And if he can't be found, or can't be reached, then nobody has the authority to officially end it. Not the foreign ministry, not the president, not the parliament writing new laws about tolls and permissions. Meanwhile, something else is happening quietly in the background. And when the top of a government goes silent, power doesn't just sit still and wait. It shifts. Military commanders, especially those from Iran's Revolutionary Guard, start operating with more independence. Fewer people checking their decisions, fewer people asking questions. Reports suggest some of these commanders may be acting without clear approval from anyone above them, including missile launches and drone operations near the contested waters. That's a dangerous shift, because a country negotiating through official statements is one thing, but a country where military factions are making decisions on their own, with no clear chain of command above them, is something else entirely. It means even if a deal gets signed on paper, there's no guarantee it will actually be followed by everyone holding a weapon on the ground. And that raises a serious concern for anyone watching this crisis from the outside. Who is Iran even negotiating for at this point? The politicians trying to draft new laws? Or the military commanders who may not be listening to those politicians at all? There are even quiet questions being asked inside Iran's own system. Questions about whether some senior officials are being deliberately kept away from the leadership, perhaps out of fear that information could leak or loyalties could shift. Nobody outside that circle knows the full answer, but the pattern is clear. a country trying to project strength and control on paper. While internally, the actual chain of command looks fractured, uncertain, and increasingly difficult to verify. And that uncertainty doesn't stay contained, it spreads outward into every negotiation, every ceasefire promise, every law being drafted about the Strait, because a signature only means something if the person signing it still holds real authority. And right now, that's exactly what nobody can confirm. Out in the Arabian Sea, something massive sits waiting, the USS Boxer, an amphibious assault ship built for one purpose, to put Marines onto a hostile shore, fighter jets on its deck, landing craft in its belly, over 2,000 Marines ready to move. But for months now, this ship hasn't been landing anyone anywhere. Instead, it's been doing something different, holding the line, making sure nothing gets past it without being seen. Alongside it sits other ships, an entire strike group, protecting each other, watching the waters, ready to respond within minutes if something happens. And American officials have made their position clear again and again. No approvals needed, no permissions required, no tolls accepted. One senior official even said something simple and direct. He believes the pressure campaign against Iran cannot continue much longer. Not because of one single event, but because of everything happening all at once. The blockade, still active. Commercial ships, still being turned back. Hundreds of millions of dollars, draining out of the country every single day. And now, layered on top of all that, a leadership structure that looks increasingly difficult to reach, verify, or trust. So what happens next? That's the real question hanging over this entire situation. Even if Iran manages to get its new law formally approved, even if that signature everyone's been waiting for finally arrives, there's still no guarantee that everyone holding power on the ground will actually follow it. Military commanders operating with limited oversight don't simply stand down the moment a paper gets signed in a government office. A single mine placed in the wrong spot, a drone operating without clear orders, a local commander making his own call days after any official agreement. These are the kinds of incidents that don't require a parliament vote. They just require one person, in one moment, deciding to act. And that's exactly what makes this situation different from a normal negotiation. Most conflicts end when both sides agree to terms, but this one may not end that cleanly. Because agreeing to terms only matters if there's a functioning structure underneath to actually carry them out. Right now, that structure looks strained. A leader who hasn't appeared publicly in months, a president who admits he can't easily reach him, a parliament writing laws that contradict the diplomatic story coming from its own foreign ministry, and military factions that may be filling the gap left behind by all of that confusion. Meanwhile, the world outside is not waiting around for Iran to sort out its internal disagreements. Ships continue moving through international waters, whether Iran's new law recognizes that right or not. The United States has made it clear it does not intend to ask permission from anyone. And that leaves Iran in a difficult position. It can write laws, it can announce tolls, it can threaten fines, but none of that matters if the rest of the world simply refuses to acknowledge any of it. A law without enforcement is just a piece of paper. And enforcement requires exactly what Iran seems to be missing right now, a clear, unified chain of command that everyone, from the top leadership down to the commanders in the field, actually listens to. So as this story moves forward, the real test won't be whether Iran can draft another bill, or announce another toll, or claim another temporary deal with a neighboring country. The real test will be whether Iran, as a country, can still function as one unified decision-maker at all. Because right now, from the outside looking in, it appears to be a government negotiating with itself just as much as it's negotiating with the rest of the world. And until that internal confusion gets resolved, every ceasefire, every shipping deal, every promise made on paper carries the same quiet risk that somewhere, someone with a weapon and no clear orders decides to act anyway. That's the story unfolding right now in the waters near Iran. Not a war that's about to begin, a war that may already be running on autopilot, with no one fully in control of where it goes next.